So one of the topics that gets pushed pretty late in the course is a topic called Git undo. It's basically some extra work on Git, because the funny thing about Git is like our very second lecture in the course was Git, and then we never talked about it again. And this lecture is just to talk about a couple of things that we kind of could have talked about, but decided not to, just because it wasn't that important, frankly. And it's about undoing things. So this lecture is about, we make mistakes in Git sometimes, and we need methods to be able to resolve those mistakes efficiently. We're going to look at doing a hard reset, altering the Git history, and amending a commit as well. So firstly, everything we've done in this course to date assumes that you are building on Git history. That means when you push something to Git, from that point forever on, and even locally, you're always just going forward. So if you have code and then you write code, you commit it, and then you make a mistake, you have to go and make another commit to remove that mistake, right? We do that for simplicity. It's easier for tutors and stuff to track it as well, which is a big plus for us. Just makes like our lives easier when it comes to the quality of your work and adherence to the standards. But there are two cool commands that let us overrule those kind of requirements that we have previously. The first one's a command called git reset. Now, Atlassian has a great article about git reset. Obviously, Atlassian used to be one of the big kind of Git overseers, kind of until Microsoft kind of bought GitHub and really kind of destroyed the market with their dominance. We will use that as guidance. So if you'd like to read up more on this, you can just go read that article. Otherwise, we'll just kind of keep things pretty simple. The first one is a Git command called git reset hard. Now, it's a pretty straightforward command. In fact, I could show you if I go to, say, the project backend, right? So let's say that I'm going to clone the project backend as it is. Here's a terminal. This is just straight. This is like the default one. So it's got no student code in it or anything like that. I'm going to go clone that. I'm going to go inside of it. And what we will see, just make this a little bigger. There we go. Perfect. What we will see is that if I git log it, you can see a log of all of the commits that have happened since the start of term, right? This includes the pushing out of various iterations. So iteration 0 release, then we made a fix. Iteration 1, we merged that in, updated package.json. Iteration 2, we made a few little updates, and then iteration 3. Now, what a git reset hard allows us to do is to go back to a particular commit. So if you imagine that there's like history, like, 1, 2, 3, 4, if you go from 4 back to 2, it's as if 3 and 4 never happened, essentially. Because Git is like a big tree, because the way to think about Git again is like you have all these commits, and how it works is if you have all these commits, right, and this was the direction that they were made in, like that. Then if you're here on commit, say 5, the reason you know the history is because your current branch, like master, like here, like master, points to commit 5. And commit 5 has a parent of 4, 4 has a parent of 3, 3 has a parent of 2, 2 has a parent of 1. And what we're doing with a git reset hard is we're essentially going and saying, master, because you're always on a branch, right? So we're dealing with a branch here. I don't want you pointing to 5 anymore. I would actually just like to hard reset you back to number 3. So now master points to number 3. And what's interesting about that is number 3 over here, it doesn't like commits, imagine them like singly linked lists. They don't really know what their children are per se. They just know what their parents are. So now master looks like it's erased these things here. In reality, these commits still exist, but because nothing references them, it's kind of like it doesn't matter that they exist, because master now just thinks it's this particular commit, which has these children here. So if I go back to this project backend example, let's say for a second that I wanted to go back to iteration 2. Well, I'd say the start of iteration 3. So I'd say, okay, well, which commit was iteration 3? Probably this one, just at a glance. There was 2 fixes, it looks like, since then. So what I can do to do that is I basically go and take this commit. I can take the whole thing, or I can take a section of it like that. I copy it, and then I come down here and I say git reset -- hard, and then I hit enter. And now what happens is when I go git log, you'll see that it starts from iteration 3. So it's like I've just gone back to previous commits and said, master, you now point there. Those other commits still technically exist, It's just that they're not used anymore. In reality, what actually happens is that these commits exist on GitLab, and once GitLab has these jobs that run intermittently where they go, or maybe it's Git, I'm not sure if it's Git or GitLab, but they run and they go, oh, there are these commits, but no one uses them anymore, so we'll delete them. It does like a cleanup process. Now, what I could do if I wanted to there is I could try and push that up, but the problem is when I go to push that code up, what you will see happen, naturally, is that I'll get an error. This is a standard error with Git, where what Git will say is, hey, you can't do that because you're rewriting history. Because if Git on GitLab sees these nice 5 commits like this, right? On GitLab, this is up on the cloud now. If GitLab's master points here, GitLab as a general rule, it wants to make sure that anytime you push, you are simply adding on to master. Now that's a bit of an oversimplification and that's a horrible color. But that's what it wants you to do. So every time you push, you always need to be kind of adding to Git, which is why when we have different branches, you know, because say someone in our team came up here and did this work, that's why we need to pull, because we can pull and merge it all in, which then creates more commits after master, in which that push now adds those more commits. So if you go to git push and there's any implication that you're not just simply building on top of the history that's already on GitLab, Git will reject you. You can overrule that if you have the right permissions by adding -- force. Now, I don't want to do that right now because I will break something naturally, as in like it'll kind of ruin your entire major project. But I could show you a funny example of that, because let's say that I decide to go and kind of unreset it. I'm going to go back to the commit it should be. Let's say git reset hard. This is like jumping to the right commit. And now what I'll do is I'll go and push a funny commit like this. I'll go and modify readme, and I'll go and put a little thing here. It's like Hayden is a silly sock, like that. And then I'll go, okay, I'm going to go add readme, adding silly sock message for Hayden, git push, that'll go up to, now this works because it's just a normal push, right? And you'll see on GitLab, there is now this extra commit here. Now, I don't want this, and I go, oh my God, I've made a mistake. I don't want this rolling out to students. If this goes to students, it's going to be really confusing. So what I could do is I could say, actually, I really need to reset this to the previous commit, this one. So I go git reset to that, and then I see my own Git history. See how it's different from GitLab's, where my Git history locally now starts at the previous commit, and then it goes back through the other ones. And I say, oh, I want that to be the new thing. But Git won't allow it because I've just tried to rewrite history. But if I add a -- force and I'm permitted to do that, it will actually go and like force update and like undo history. And when I refresh that page, it is now gone like that. So that's the power of that, basically. And a really cool little tip. That one's super useful for undoing mistakes. It can be really useful before you push to master, because in most repos that you'll experience and work with in your entire life, especially in teams, you won't have the capability to go and rewrite history. It's just not going to be like something that anyone lets you do, because it's very dangerous. It's very, very dangerous. But what you can do is, let's say you make 3 or 4 commits locally and you make a mistake. If you can kind of reset history as much as you want between the 2 times you pushed. You know, because anything that's happened since your last push to GitLab is kind of fair game, you know, because GitLab doesn't know about it yet. So it's kind of like if you make a mistake, it's like GitLab didn't even know there was a mistake in the first place. So you can just go and change it. So I summarize it here as like a git reset hard is saying, I want to go back in time and I don't care about anything that's happened since that point I'm going back to. That's the power of git reset hard. Git reset soft, though, is a slightly different thing. And I think it's a little bit hard to understand. The way I've described this one here is it's like saying, I like the code I have and I want to keep all the code I have here. However, I'd like to alter how the history looks. So git reset hard is when you want to get rid of the commit history and the changes that came with that commit history. Whereas git reset soft is how you can keep all the code as it is, but change the git history. Now, I think that's really hard to understand. So what I want to show you here instead is like, let's imagine I'm still on this iteration 3 repo here. Now, let's imagine that I go and make 3 simple changes. I'm going to do them really quickly. I'm going to go and add something to the README, which says change 1. I'm going to commit it. Change 1. Yep. Okay, commit that. And then I'm going to go and make another change called change 2. Then I'm going to commit that. And then I'm going to make another change called change 3. And I'm going to commit that. So now I'm in this situation where I've got 3 commits on my branch, but I don't want 3 commits. I feel like they should all be part of the same commit. You know, it's a bit messy, it's a bit confusing. I just want it to be like change 1, 2, and 3 as a commit. So what I can do, and follow me here, because I think this one's the only confusing one truly, is I can go back to like and say, well, I want to get rid of all of these commits, the records, you know, like the messages, the labels, the records, and I just want to keep, and I want to rewrite back from this point. So I want to go back in time as if I hadn't made those commits, but I want to keep all the code. That's a git reset soft. So I can go and take this commit here. What I can do is, you'll see there's nothing to commit at the moment, but if I go git reset soft and then I give it that hash, now what you'll see is really interesting. I go to git log, it's reset me back before those 3 commits. But here's the interesting thing. When I go git status, you'll see that there's some changes here. And when I go git diff, I mean, it's a bit hard to see, but how do I, but what you'll see, sorry, if I go to open the README, you'll see those 3 changes are there. So I made 3 separate commits, and then I could say, actually, I'm just going to go and change that. Changes 1, 2, 3. And now you'll see there's a git log like this, where I have those changes 1, 2, 3 here. And if I was to push that up to GitLab and add this extra commit here, you'll see that those 3 changes all came through in one hit, which is very interesting. And of course, if I wanted to reset that fully, I could say git reset hard bb41b1. Yep. Git push won't work because I'm rewriting history, and I could do a force here as well. So softs generally aren't super common. We actually use them a lot in the course to clean things up, because what'll happen quite often is like we'll make lots of changes before an iteration. So like in the case of this one here, see how we have these commits like iteration 0 release. Over the term, between terms, not me, but we will work on assignments and we will update them and fix them. And we will have we'll have a history with like 20 commits from all the tutors working on it. And then just before release, what we do is we git reset soft it back to nothing, and then we make 1 commit so that students like you aren't confused by the long list of git commit history. So a bit more obscure, but that's the advantage of soft. The third of 3 things we wanted to talk about with git was a git commit amend. A git commit amend is just like a normal git commit, like git commit -m and then your commit name. But what the amend does is, instead of it adding another commit on top, it actually just like replaces the last commit. So it's a little bit like an overwrite. And that one's actually really useful when you make a mistake, because let's say, again, I'm working on the major project here, right? And what I do is I go and I open up my README and I go and add a line up the top here that says Hayden is a silly sock. Okay, cool. And then I go and commit that. I go and say, yeah, I go and git add README. I go and git commit Hayden message added to README. And then I'm like, sweet, all good, great, sounds good. But then what I notice is, oh my God, there was a typo in sock. I wrote sook. Hayden is a silly sook. I don't want it to be sook, I want it to be sock. So what I have to do is change that. Now, if you're a student, what you would normally do, right, is you would get rid of the O, and then you would do a git status, and you would do a git add, and then you would do a git commit message that says like, you know, fixed typo in silly sock message. But that would do is that would now mean you've got a commit for your silly sock, silly sook, and then you have to make another commit to fix it. But what you can do instead is, if you actually add the -- amend, I know my head's a little in the way there, let me move this across. If you add a -- amend, what you'll then see happen is that you now have it will simply override the last commit. So if I just show you the commit log for a second, see this one here, Hayden message added to README, I can actually just say git commit -- amend like this. And what this will do is this will take all my changes, right? It's prompting me here and saying like, are you sure this is what you want? I say yes. And what it did, if I look at the git log, was it actually just went and overrode that. So there's no second commit here, but you'll see that commit will include the changes. The important thing to note is pay attention. You'll notice that the commit hashes are different. See how the original one I made was 7604, whereas the second one I made was CA668. So it is a different commit. It's not like, if this makes sense, this is why we also put it in the rewriting history bucket, because if you pushed a commit to GitLab and then you amended that commit and then tried to push again, Git would require a force because you would be considering amending history. Because we are amending history in this case. It doesn't look like it, but we are. So when I go further down here, I can also change the message. If I do -- amend and be like, this is a new message, like that, you'll see that now I have also a new commit here, different hash with a new message. I can also change the author if I'd like to. You can do this in a normal commit, by the way. But like, let's say I'm like, oh God, that shouldn't be from Hayden. I need that to be from Yuchao. I can be like, yep, that's from Yuchao, like this. And I can write in Yuchao's name and email like that. And now when I go to the Git log, I'll see that this one actually was from Yuchao. I can also change the date, and you can change basically everything. But the point is that there's a lot you can do with amended commits. And once again, because you're rewriting history, this stuff works best when you fix up a commit that you've yet to push to GitLab. That's it. Very quick. Trying to be quite efficient with stuff because it's, week 9 and everyone's got places to be, and most of you aren't going to do much with this. But before we wrap up, Q&A, are there any questions about Git reset hard, Git reset soft, Git commit amend, anything like that? Okay, I've got one question here, which is, if you did -- force, would there be conflicts you would have to solve then, or does it depend? -- force doesn't care about conflicts because it takes your tree on your machine, it basically says, because if you think about conflicts, what's going on normally is that when you push to master, when you push to master, you are pushing a commit to master, and that commit has an associated history with it. If you push a commit to master and it turns out that commit is not just further ahead of master's commit, maybe because someone did some other work and there's a conflict, the Git will get mad. When you do a force push, Git doesn't even do a check. It doesn't complain about merge conflicts. It just erases it. That's why typically, like, if any of you go work for Google, like any company, any not tiny company, you will never be allowed to do this as a general rule, because it just destroys other people's stuff. Like, if you force push to a Git repo and someone else has a history, it's really hard to manage that. They basically have to delete their repo and reclone it. Like, once you start rewriting history, it's a bit of a mess, which is why after we push to your repos, we don't ever rewrite history again. That's why you see these extra commits made by the staff. But prior to pushing to your repos, we flatten everything and rewrite everything, because it doesn't matter. There's never going to be any confusion about histories and things like that. Yeah. Hope that makes sense. Any other questions about it? Cool. Okay, let's wrap up there and we'll move on to the second part of today.